Howdy, folks, and welcome to Influ-Men-Sirs, podcast where we explore influential men and their influence on men and the broader conversation around masculinity as a whole. So today, we will be continuing our ongoing series of reviewing all 9 types of the Enneagram theory of personality and the ways in which that intersects with masculinity. We are 2/3 done. We just finished type 6. So what do you know? We're on to type 7s. So yeah. One of the key things with 7s, as I've done with all the types, is to look right at that motivation. And the biggest motivation for 7s is a desire to avoid pain at all costs, right? So it's sort of interesting because 7s from the outset, or at least from an outsider looking in, are in some ways the most extroverted, almost effervescent. And they're literally, their name often is called the enthusiast, right? So they are full of life, full of joy, excitable people. There's just a vitality to them, a larger than life quality. But underneath all of that, right, which all of that is a lot of that, like it's larger than life. That's the expression. So often you can apply with 7s, some with other types, but especially 7s. And so a lot of that larger than life qualities is at its core a desire to avoid pain. So attached with that desire to avoid pain, the fear is that if pain does come, no one will be alongside them to help them handle it, and that in some ways it will consume them, or it will kind of take over. I've described a little bit already, but the energy of 7s, they're the most vivacious, again, most extroverted, talk the fastest. I'll probably speak to that in just a second, but yeah, they talk the fastest, joke the quickest. There's just again, enthusiast. Their literal name is the enthusiast, and that it fits so well with the experience of being around them, right? This enthusiasm that's so infectious. And then again, we'll kind of speak to this a little bit later in our show today, where we'll talk a little bit about the way that each type has a specific conversational pattern. So for type 7s, it's storytelling, and 7s are the best. They have a particular and powerful gift in telling stories. And the other thing that is interesting to note is there can almost be this sense of like, man, are these impulsive people? Like, are they just wild and out and kind of going from thing to thing to thing? There's some element of that going on, but I thought it important to note that there's a lot more cerebrally happening. Again, because they, along with 5s and 6s, are what's called the head triad or the thinking triad. So they are definitely very cerebrally inclined. So another thing to note is they are probably the most future-oriented of all types. So I've already mentioned how this Enneagram theory works and how it has a bunch of different flavors or ways that you can put numbers together. So one of the other ways is you can distinguish types by the way in which they have an orientation particular to time. Do they spend a lot of time in the future, a lot of time in the past, or do they spend a lot of time in the present, but the wrong kind of present? So for 7s, it's always to the future. What is the next thing? Especially and particularly, what is the next exciting thing? What is the next fun thing? What is the thing that I'm going to enjoy the most? Again, tied to, because when I do that, I very successfully avoid pain. Yeah. And then kind of in that same vein, they probably struggle with FOMO more than other types do. Again, we can all experience some degree of FOMO. But because 7s are so often in the future or planning and wanting to do fun, exciting, larger than life sorts of things, to see that other people are enjoying something that they are not a part of, that's like tantamount to torture a lot of times for type 7s. And then, the final point is same thing. Life is kind of about fresh experiences. 7s, a lot of numbers are going to like this, but I would say 7s, most of all, really, really enjoy novelty or kind of doing something that they've never quite done before. That in and of itself has a particular fun and excitement that they can't deny. So, yeah. And then a little bit about their behavior. So kind of like I've been mentioning before, they're very talkative. Really can the speed of which that they're thinking and then the words are produced. It just has that pace and rapidness that none of the other types quite have. And then kind of onto that, or along those same lines, is this idea that they'll be talking about something, again, having enthusiasm, something creative. It's another thing I haven't mentioned. Sevens tend to be wildly creative. And then they're on to the next creative endeavor or notion or whatever it is. And then everyone's like, wait a minute, but we were just with that other idea that you had that was cool and that we were enjoying and we were vibing with, and you're already on to the next thing. And then, Joe could almost be in the sevens like, no, I'm on to the next thing. Right. And one of the things that it's not necessarily a somber thing. All types can struggle with addiction, but all all types can have their roads to addiction, but there are some that I think, unfortunately, due to the inner wiring and the experience of the world, can have an unfortunately easier road or can stumble into addiction a little bit more easily. I would say sevens can fit this bill, and just because I don't want them to be alone out there, I would also say that fours, eights, nines, again, any and all types can have some struggles with addictions. Any and all types can be really, really struggling with addiction, but there are certain ones that the roadmap is a little bit easier. And the reason why I would say that is true for type sevens is if a primary motivation is to avoid pain, any version of a drug brings a euphoria, right? Whether it's a literal substance you consume, whether it's sex, whether it's gambling, whether it's shopping, right? In some ways, it doesn't necessarily matter, but any of those things can bring on that sense of euphoria, which is very potent at avoiding pain. And then another thing, this is something that I mentioned that all types can do this, and this is more something that sevens, when maybe they're in a little bit more of an unhealthy place, they'll do this. When they're healthy, this is not going to be as much of a concern, but they can kind of overemphasize humor sort of at the wrong time. So especially when things get deep or heavy, or conversations or notions around pain begin to emerge, then that's where some like mistimed or misplaced jokes may emerge, and that can sometimes pose an issue. So some examples. One that immediately comes to mind is very, very classic is Kramer from Seinfeld. So sort of like I was talking about before, this larger than life quality. So the moment that Kramer walks into the room, right, he's really dramatic. He opens up the door, but it's not dramatic, maybe like in a morose way, like with a 4, right? Or a 3 way where they might be like very refined. For Kramer, and what can kind of be true for sevens in general, is it's sort of this loose, carpe diem of it all, which that's pointing to the next guy that I'll be talking about. But this sort of seizing life by the horns. And this is so often what Jerry and the rest of the crew comment on with Kramer, like, what is your life? Like, what is going on with you? And I think one of the most classic and best examples of Kramer just being 7 of sevens is in the episode where he's talking about his bus ride, right? That in a lot of ways it should be a scenario where it's the most average of situations, right? Living in New York, taking bus or transit, kind of expected. Very few people have cars, just from point A to point B. But for whatever reason, when Kramer goes on, there's an instance of, fighting. The bus driver somehow gets incapacitated, I think, and then Kramer has to drive, right? It's just this wildness, this embellishing that Kramer fits the bill for so well. And then another one that, again, is almost said somewhat with a somber tone. And I think that's the thing I really want to convey, is we can look at this 7 archetype and be like, oh, they're so fun. Incidentally, my wife, she'll joke and she'll say, I wish I was a 7. I wish I was a 7. But I've had a lot of 7s that I've known, that I've been friends with, that in some ways, once we've really gotten to talk at that deeper level, they'll sort of say, it's not all it's cracked up to be. And so this other example that I want to use is Robin Williams. So obviously, when he gets on the scene, I believe it was Mork and Mindy, when he got really, really famous. Not that he wasn't before, but that like really catapulted him, right? And then we have all of the things, right? He appeared in so many movies. He, again, larger than life, talked so quickly, always gave people a smile, right? That's probably the thing that sevens in some ways are the most equipped to do, almost better than other types. But then the issue is that being able to readily give others a smile comes with some version of a cost. And I think that's kind of what's displayed in Robin Williams' life, unfortunately, and kind of what ended up happening. Alternatively, I think one of the things that he did, or one of his performances, that I think almost shows this like really, really healthy, not perfect, but healthy side of Type 7 is his performance in uh, Good Will Hunting. And just in some ways taking that 7 energy, and I don't talk a lot about this, but each of the types has a particular energies that they go to in stress and energies that they go to in strength. And I think that in that story, Robin Williams' character, because, as is true of many actors, whatever their personality is, they tend to take on roles that fulfill that personality. But what was great about Good Will Hunting is drawing on that Type 5 energy, right? The more calmer, wise, but still really insightful, really observant, which is sort of where 7s can be at that highest or healthiest form. And then the tell. So it's kind of like I was mentioning before. This is more something you're going to notice when the folks are a little bit on the unhealthy side, but sort of ill-timed jokes, right? Or something that the very thing I was talking about, where they can put a smile on your face, but this clearly seems like a moment where we shouldn't be smiling, and they still might try to do that. And it kind of just the offness of that, and that kind of being, again, more 7s that are on the unhealthy side. I don't think it's more so on the healthy side per se. But the other thing I kind of wrote is just the quickness of communication, and then also the humor that comes with that. It's really difficult to match not only the pace of 7s, but also in some ways the quality of that humor, right? It's not just like haha, like slapstick or lowbrow humor. I mean, not to say that they don't have lowbrow humor. I'm not saying that, but it's more just the level of wit and the quickness that it comes with it. This is something that's a particular specialness I think that 7s have that other types are not necessarily going to have at the same level. And then I've already been mentioning it, but their conversational pattern. So storytelling. Like I was mentioning before, Kramer goes on a bus ride. It's something epic like that happens. Someone near and dear to my wife that she really, really loved and cherished, family member, we've long suspected was a 7, because he had an innate ability to tell really, really awesome stories. And also when we ended up watching a different movie called Big Fish, that character, Ewan McGregor's character, very much a 7, very much in how the story plays out, and how that guy, the actual main character is that guy's son. All he knows is this larger than life narrative of his father, but then underneath it, you can kind of see the goodness and the wonder that comes from like well-told stories, right? That it channels something in us that we all really love and long for. And again, that kind of goes to the longing. So 7s are also really, really idealistic, underneath the humor, underneath the wit, underneath even the avoiding the pain. Underneath, sometimes what can be painful is that life isn't as idealistic as they would want it to be. And then I'm just going to describe some places or institutions that have 7 energy. So Disneyland, right? So in some ways, it's not just that it's fun and exciting, but it's more that in some ways, Disneyland is one of the best places to avoid pain at all costs. Perhaps not the pain of the long lines, to be fair. But like as a general rule, general concept, it's literally called the happiest place on earth, right? So in a lot of ways, to avoid pain, you want to be happy. There we go, right? It kind of fits that bill pretty well. And then another one is a cruise boat, right? So sort of hopping from place to place, going from adventure to adventure, having that home base, but the most important part of the trip is sort of the novelty. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a cruise. It can just be almost an adventure, I would say. Any spontaneous kind of adventure, wherever that might be, wherever you might go, that itself has some 7-ish energy to it. And then the last bit is just like spiritual retreats. So again, with that notion of idealism, 7s, similar to 4s, similar somewhat to 5s, they have a bit of a mystical bent to them. That pursuit of the ideal, and in some ways the euphoric, not just euphoric as far as drugs, but euphoric as in transcendent, almost holy, you might say. Seven's really long for that. They really, really crave for that. And so spiritual retreats kind of provide that. And in some ways, almost in that healthier sense, more contemplative, helping them go to that 5-ish space, that 5-ish energy. So, yeah. All right. Well, that is our show for today. I hope that was helpful. Yeah, we are likely to be filming. I would say filming. I love movies. That's why I wanted to say filming. We will be recording LeBron James tomorrow. That will be very exciting. So stay tuned for that. We had already recorded Batman. That will be coming out. The Batman that will be coming out soon. I almost didn't mention this, but I think that Batman's arch nemesis, the Joker, I think he's a very unhealthy type 7. I didn't go into too much detail with that, but at some point we'll definitely explore a bit of that character and what he means culturally. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed our show today, and I will see you next time. All right. Peace. Hey y'all, Caleb here. Thank you for listening to our show today. Please like and subscribe wherever the heck you listen to pods, and make sure to follow us on all the socials at Influ-Men-Sirs. That is INFLU-men-Sirs. We'll see you next time. Peace.